prevent you from speaking moistly. Speaking moistly. Keep 2 meters apart. Speaking moistly. Speaking moistly. Keep 2 meters apart. Speaking moistly.
Oh, I gotta stop it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new edition of Speaking Moistly with me, as usual, Greg Wycliffe. Sir, it has been a while. How are you today? Goodness me. Nice to see you. It
has been a while. I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right.
Nice to hear.
Back into the content grind.
Yeah.
I was working up north for 6 months doing blue collar work, so it's good to be back into checking the Twitter feed and seeing what's going on in Canadian politics.
All of the madness.
Because I feel like I haven't missed much, but at the same time, it just feels like, okay, another lap of the drain, just circling the drain over here.
It does seem like every day. Sometimes I feel, because I do my show daily, and I have done my show daily since, all the time when you've been up north, I've been continuing to do it. And some days I think to myself, this is the same show. Like, corporate wants you to tell the difference between Monday's show and Wednesday's show, and I'm like, there's no difference. It's the same thing. I even made the same joke, right? So it's one of those things where there's a weird grind that's going on right now, and I feel like it's trying to like grind us down a little bit. The similarity of how in Jurassic Park, where the raptors, there's a fence to deal with the raptors, and the idea is that like once you electrocute the damn things enough, they stop trying the fence. We're supposed to stop trying the fence. We're supposed to be, Tommy Robinson was arrested in Calgary today. Like that's another, one of the raptors got electrocuted. Stop it, right? Like they're trying to train us out of what we were raised in and like the expectations of our social norms. They're trying to say, no, you can't do that. But see, these pro-Palestinian people, they can do that. Sure, they're going to start making rockets any second. That's fine. But you guys, you can't wave Canadian flags. It's weird. I mean, it's not weird because I understand that we're in the middle of a communist takeover. But, the 5 years ago me is still adjusting.
So when you go day after day, show after show, and you're like, these are the same show. This is the same. What specifically is that about? Like the feeling of demoral. This just seems like another acutely demoralizing news item.
Yeah, like
that sort of thing. Or
well, there are new aspects of the old stuff. Like if I pick up a story like COVID and stuff, you know what I mean? Like COVID is a story that I remember saying like, I hope this isn't a big deal. So that was a constantly evolving thing to talk about for 8 months, but I talked about it almost every day, 8 months, for 4 years, whatever, since 2020. For a long period of time, it's been dominating. So in that way, so like when I start doing a COVID segment, I'm like, my goodness, these people are effing liars. They keep lying. They're lying about absolutely everything. And they scaffold the lies they previously told in order to make true the lies they're telling today. They're like, well, 3 years ago, the Omicron blah, blah, blah was really, really scary. And, it's the new variant is really scary too. And you're just like, hold on a second. What?
So what do you mean by scaffold the old lie?
Like they use the old lie to support the new lie. Like they don't go back all the way to 2020 and say, remember COVID? They're like, Omicron, that the Delta thing, that was really bad, right, guys? They used these old lies because none of that was true. All of that was false. Like there's been bombshell after bombshell after bombshell about the problems with COVID, the response, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I know we're putting this on YouTube, but F it, right? I don't actually care all that much. We'll put it on Rumble too. But they've had all of these things that have been false, and we're supposed to accept it at face value, and then when they get found out, they just double down on the falsehoods and hope that we don't pick up the pitchforks. But if we do pick up the pitchforks, well, we're terrorists suddenly.
Yeah. I mean, aren't some of them sort of like admitting that it was a lie? Isn't there some sort of like reporting that's like, oh well, it was a lie, or they're not saying it was a lie, but they're saying, oh yeah, it turns out. Maybe some of these pharmaceutical injectable products actually aren't that safe.
Yes. Yeah. There's that's what I mean. Today's bombshell was one of the major pharmaceutical companies that pushed this thing and started with a P. I don't know if I can say that. It doesn't matter. They knew that there were problems with injection, and they didn't tell anybody, or they did, and the governments knew too. And still tomorrow they'll come up with a new thing saying, have you gotten your latest booster? Because it's super scary, and let's watch Olivia Chow dance with this drag queen. It's like, what?
And well, I mean, I find what's this happened during COVID, and like it's been happening for a while now, but something I call accountability lag.
Yes.
There seems to be this lag of accountability where, hey, maybe it came from a lab, right? That was unacceptable. You get banned from YouTube. And then 9 months, the way that accountability lag in general works is, news item happens, opposing the item or talking about it at the time would be very important to do that.
Yep.
But instead you get canceled, excuse me, called crazy. But then 9 to 18 months later, you were actually right about whatever said news item was. And then the people who were calling you crazy and dismissing you and canceling you, they're agreeing with what you said 9 months ago, but it's too late. It's like the time to be accountable for what happened 9 to 18 months ago. It's too late to actually address the thing that was happening.
Reminds me of the Danforth shooting. So remember when the Danforth shooting happened? And
there's a lot of examples of this.
Let's
go through a few.
But it helps to actually go back before COVID, because this is happening before COVID. Like, this happened well before COVID, and every single thing that happens is exploited to push us towards the powers that be currently towards their goal. Right. So the Danforth thing,
the daily crisis is used to push forward
always. And it doesn't,
whatever the crisis is, they're like, we're going to use this angle, that angle.
Yep. It doesn't matter if it seems like it's good for the side that wants sanity to return. Right. If you're like, oh my gosh, the public is going to respond very, very poorly to this mass shooting on the Danforth. And then accountability lag takes place, and you can't talk about it. And all of the things, the fentanyl.
The narrative was about mental illness, and we should feel bad for the shooter, basically.
Yep. Crazy. And then as soon as the kind of air came out of the balloon, it got deflated. Then other aspects maybe kind of leaked out, and people started talking about it again, and so on and so forth. And that's another thing that I mean. Like, if I pick up a story and it's really, really obviously fake, and I say this is obviously fake, and then 4 months later, 5 months later, 9 months later, Jon Stewart's like, hey, did you see that thing? It's fake. And Stephen Colbert's saying, oh, are you kidding me? And then they still push the vax. And I was like, I've been saying this for months. Of course it's obviously fake.
And then funny enough, 9 months ago, Jon Stewart was making fun of you,
right?
For having the correct opinion,
exactly,
right?
Yeah, because he's a gatekeeper, and it's like, and there are so many of them, right? And so, like, that's what I mean by it's kind of the same show. It's not that it's not useful. I don't think, because I don't think I'd do it if I found it useless. If I was like, I'm not having any kind of impact, and I am, because fundamentally the show's for me. Like, it's an outlet for me. I enjoy it. It's a hobby, right? But like, I don't know that I would continue doing it if I had one viewer, but we'll see. Maybe I will. We'll see how bad the censorship gets, I guess.
Yeah, but I think this, like, accountability lag, if we're going to call it that, it applies to a lot of different things. Kind of like you were saying, news items, and even with COVID, that's a very obvious one. The vaccine, that's a very obvious one. But also, I feel like the same thing is going to happen with Pierre Poilievre and immigration.
Yes.
Like people are already getting very upset about immigration. Like, being anti-immigration is, for the first time since I've followed Canadian politics, is almost becoming like a socially acceptable stance. Which is crazy.
Yep.
And that's not, and by the way, that's not to credit, no offense, that's not really to credit Bernier and the PPC necessarily, but it's literally, it's honestly thanks to like SixBuzz and like social media accounts posting just very detestable or very like kind of shocking content to be like, yo, this is how many Indians are like in downtown Toronto. This is been really, this is what it looks like in Canada now. Like, it's kind of these visuals and these kind of visceral pieces of content that make people go, whoa, wow, like something's going on here. Like, something should be done about this. But my point was, only just now did Pierre Poilievre say, hey, we're going to reduce immigration. He said it in French when he was cornered on his like tour bus in Quebec, of course.
Yep.
But, as the sentiment to try and oppose mass migration increases, it's going to be like 9 months to 18 months until Pierre Poilievre actually makes a stance on the podium, which people will reward him for it. But it's like, man, we were saying this like 2 years ago.
And the damage done.
You knew we were saying this 2 years ago. And it's like, you could have done so much. You could have done so much if you started doing this 2 years ago. But instead, you're starting 2 years from now, which, okay. Well, you just let 2 million more people slip through the goal line there.
Well, the best time to start losing weight is like 2 years ago. But the second best time is today. And it's the same thing, right?
I think, though, for people like us, it's such a thankless job.
Oh, yeah.
Like, or even I'll even include people like in Diagolon or anyone further right than Pierre Poilievre. They do all this work to talk about, hey, look what's happening in the schools, like it's transgender indoctrination. This is alarming. This is crazy. And then eventually Pierre Poilievre is like, hey, says one thing, and then he gets all the credit. Yep. It's such a thankless job for the people who are further right. Well, it's actually kind of like sticking their neck out there, getting canceled.
But it's interesting.
It's because of these people that the Overton window actually starts to shift in our direction. It's not because of Pierre Poilievre finally caving and finally saying something weak and not even that powerful, by the way. But
if you're too early, I want to talk about the Overton window, but if you're too early, then what happens to you is they Bernier you, right? Like if you come out and say, you don't think so? If Poilievre started figuring things out or Trump you?
Of course they do. But this idea, listen, we're not going to actually turn the country around and try to reverse these trends happening. You're not going to accomplish anything without being called racist, sexist,
I agree with you. But I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. I'm just saying that if like Bernier actually did try to do something within the CPC, but during the leadership race, they usurped it and it was taken over by Andrew Scheer. And like Bernier did what he could do during that time period, and then he left.
I give Bernier a lot of credit, especially starting the party and everything he did at the beginning. Countering lockdowns is very good.
Yep.
But I think like specifically over the past like year, in terms of being like anti-immigration, sure, the PPC has done a few things. But again, in terms of making the popular sentiment like outside of our echo chamber to be more anti-immigrant, I swear like it's just been happening naturally. Yes. And it's really comedians on Instagram and accounts like Six Buzz documenting and talking about what's actually like, the sort of unavoidable color brown that seems to be, painting. I don't know.
No. And like, I don't. I want to agree. Like, I want to agree with you. I think that the beginning of the PPC era into lockdowns and kind of the last year in the PPC are completely different time periods, and I would have lots of different things to say about both. But the people who really made a big difference, I think, pushing the Overton window, you're right, are smaller accounts, people who are silenced, and not like the Kean Bexties and like all of those people, or the mid-level people either. You know what I mean? Like the Rebel News and things like that. I wouldn't even credit them because they're not even being edgy. They're just they're doing for the conservatives what the rest of the media is doing for the liberals. And it's the smaller accounts that are pushing the Overton window. And I would say that Ferryman is probably one of the most prolific. Like he's pushed hard, and he's pushed interesting, funny memes that resonate and that speak to what's actually happening. And people don't like that. The powers that be don't like how easily that's changing the Overton window. Because what I was going to say is, if you go back a couple of years, the sentiment against any newcomer to Canada was always positive. Didn't matter who, didn't matter what they were doing. It was always positive. And now, in a very short period of time, and not just because of Ferryman and his memes, but partially we can talk about it because
the only reason there's all Ferry. He's the one. He's the man behind all of it.
But I mean, like it does give people the ability to talk about things that maybe would be uncomfortable to talk about in a funny way, in an accessible way that would otherwise not happen. You know what I mean? And so at the same time, and that's what I mean, timing, right? Like as this sentiment was growing, people like Ferry were producing things that could help people express themselves in a way that seemed non-threatening, right? And of course, the government's saying, "Oh my gosh, this is the biggest threat in the world," and we're like, literally, it's paper. It is comics. Like you're losing your mind over political cartoons, and That's pretty cringe, guys. Like, that's pretty cringe. And they're like, you're racist. That's like, well, if you stopped having a full-blown, if you stopped orchestrating and paying for the full-blown invasion of our country with our tax dollars, maybe we'd be less racist, right? Like, holy smokeronis.
Well, yeah, and it's I don't know. We'll talk about the foreign interference thing going on,
Well,
because
before we
go ahead.
before we do, I want to talk about the election, the by-election, because like
okay.
because that happened, and I think immigration has something to do with it. Now I am firmly, and you may be like, I don't think we've talked about this, but I am firmly in the camp of the pro-Palestinian Israel protests are the same thing as Black Lives Matter when they were tearing down statues, are the same thing as the rail blockades when they were putting flaming debris on the railroad tracks, right? Because the railroad police were like, I don't know what we could possibly do. And people were like, the criminal code says you can't put debris on the tracks. These people are putting flaming debris on the tracks. And they're like, man, I don't know what we could do. And then the same thing. These people are tearing down statues and the police are like, oh no, it's protesters. What do we do? And people are like, arrest them. Right? It's the same thing. And so these pro-Palestinian things, they're like, oh no, they're in Jewish neighborhoods. What do we do? And people are like, stop them? Like, they're breaking laws? Are you kidding? Like, over and above the conflict over Israel, Palestine, all of the things all of the buzzwords around that, I don't care. If you walk into a neighborhood with a mask and like a baseball bat intending to smash car windows because of Free Palestine, you should be under arrest, or because of any reason.
Wait,
like,
was that was in LA though, right? That clip?
Oh, no. I'm talking, no. And I mean, like, there are people all over. Like, one of the reasons that I brought it up for this by-election thing is this is a Jewish neighborhood. This downtown Toronto neighborhood is a Jewish neighborhood. And that's one of the reasons why, number one, last week, the Trudeau Liberals declared the IRGC terrorists. And they said, yeah, they're terrorists, but we're not actually going to do anything about it in Canada, but they're terrorists. And so people were upset. And that's why they acted, because they thought that they were going to lose this seat. And look at that. Their internal polling was exactly right. They were going to lose this seat. Too little, too late. And so, like, but I'm talking more broadly. The behavior of the pro-Palestinian protesters across Canada is very brazen. They break things. They assault people just like Antifa with impunity, and they know they're not going to get called out. They can start up they can ask universities, like, you need to get an injunction to take me off your property. What? Like, that's insanity. But if you're a Jew and you put up a tent on the property, they'll remove you as fast as if you were a Canadian patriot trying to put a tent up with a Canadian flag on the property. And I saw that at the University of Toronto last week too. So I thought that was it, because the Jewish kids who were counter-protesting tried to set up their own encampment, and they were torn down within an hour. And I thought, that's interesting.
Yeah, I haven't been following the protest mania.
No, I haven't. Every time I talk about it, I always say this is exactly the same thing. It's bullshit. It's bullshit tactics from a lying government, basically. Because I think this is all from the government. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to that topic on like a very kind of high top level, I'm just worried about escalating war over there. And there seems to be a sort of direction towards, like, another proxy war between Israel and Iran.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's kind of my...
If a war breaks out and the U.S. If a war breaks out in the Middle East, we're supposed to be talking about the Toronto by-election. But if a war breaks out in the Middle East...
Related.
That's right. If a war breaks out in the Middle East and Hezbollah and all of the people who are surrounding Israel decide that they want to deal with Israel and remove them or whatever, without the United States, Israel loses that war. Right? Without the West, basically, Israel loses that war, and they know it. And so, like, while you say, I'm worried about war breaking out, the only thing... You're
saying it's inevitable.
Well, it's inevitable, yes, because it's like a cancer in that area. It's like the only reason Israel is there is because the U.S. bankroll the West, but the West bankrolls it to be a democracy in the Middle East, right? The only reason it's there is because it's being paid to be there. And they wage war. That's what they do, right? And they're trying to control another canal like the Suez Canal. But I'm
afraid to ask, like, what's the cancer in this scenario? I don't know if you should actually answer that though.
Well, can I explain like this? I'll explain like this. So, like, women's suffrage as an example of a societal cancer where they take a group of your own citizens and say, hey, did you know that men were subjecting you? Like, you're basically a slave. You're a slave to men. I can't believe it. And then they convince this group of your own.
So just
it's,
so everyone,
it's a cancer.
Mark is saying that letting women vote is a cancer. Just want to clear that up for
Oh,
everybody.
I've explained it quite a lot on my show. I think that you should have a stake in, like, I think you should be a landowner, male or female, it doesn't matter, but you should be a landowner to vote. I don't think that just you get to vote. I think that if you own land, then you get to vote. And like, if you own land, then your vote is your family's representative vote. Like, and if you're the patriarch of the family, I guess, because that's how our society works, you get that vote. And like, if your wife is like, I'm an NDPer, you're like, sorry, man.
I love this. I feel like over the past 6 months since I've been away, every like right-wing freedom fighter person I know is like, democracy isn't that good. Like,
it's just really the tyranny of they were
really
right. It's the tyranny. It is the tyranny of the majority. And if all you need is the majority doesn't have to be right. They just have to be in agreement. And like, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. So the way the U.S. has done it is correct. But for vote, like, I don't necessarily think women shouldn't have a right to vote. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, in order to vote in the best interest of the country, it should only be stakeholders who have an actual stake in the future of the country. And the only way you have that is if you own it, right? Is if you own land.
We're talking about the Toronto by-election right
now. We definitely are. And so you're asking about the cancer. Basically, they did the same thing in the the race wars, but they did the women's suffrage again in the 1960s. So all the racism and stuff has been to destabilize society. But it's the same, it's a physical. Well, the cancer in this situation is that whole peninsula is Arab. Like, the whole thing, it's the Ottoman Empire. And it was handed over to Israel by England in 1948 because reasons after the Second World War. And the reasons were pretty bullshit. And the Arabs were told, the Arabs in the Ottoman Empire, Turkey now, were told, if you support us, the Allies, during the Second World War, then we'll give you your land back in Israel there. No problem. We'll just give it all back to you. No problem. And then after the Second World War, people were like, hey, so what about that land thing? They're like, oh yeah, we're giving it to the Jews. So like, and there was a whole bunch of different parcels of land all carved up in the Arab Peninsula, right? But like that one went to the Jews, and people were pissed off about it. And like, that's done on purpose. You don't do that if you want peace. You don't do that. You're not like, listen, like, your cousin Mark's coming to live with you, and like, we all know is how he is. And that's just, not like you guys, right? Like, you're all Arab, and Mark's not Arab, and you just have to live with him and deal with him how he is.
Yeah.
Good luck.
I mean, from a high level, it's like, is it a surprise that there's been a conflict?
Not at all.
For the past 60 years?
It's ridiculous.
It's not really surprising.
And that's when they said on October 7th, totally unprovoked. I was like, hold on a second. I did a whole show. If you look at my October 8th show, I was like, listen, we have to talk about this, everybody. I'm not being anti-Semitic, but history does exist. And so, like, the Toronto by-election is obviously conservative.
Yeah, let's switch over to that. Because I'm not entirely well versed on the whole Israel-Palestine.
The only reason
I guess my only thing that I've been noticing is the people who are pro-Israel and pro-Zionist, they seem to be very like agenda driven. Yeah. Like they seem to be very sort of like blinders on, like, I don't care about the other side of the story. Like, I'm just pushing for what Israel wants. And it's like, we could talk about like the whole Daily Wire situation, but like, that stuff is fascinating.
It's interesting.
It's very
get out of here, Candace.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
but in Israel, they don't like Netanyahu. Before the October 7th situation, there was mass protests in Israel to get rid of Netanyahu. They hated him. Well, and then after, he wanted to have a whole war. Anyway, Karen.
But in our kind of sphere, what I find fascinating is criticizing the leader of a nation. You can criticize the leader of any country you wanted. Justin Trudeau, Donald Trump, Australia, China,
Boris,
you name it. But if you criticize the leader of Israel, for some reason, this makes you a villain all of a sudden. Like, that's the one country where you cannot You know, you can't, if you criticize the leader, you're
know.
criticizing the entire people. And it's like,
Yeah.
whoa,
Yeah.
that's a pretty interesting phenomenon.
It's very interesting.
But yeah, in the past 6 months, since October 7th, there's been a fall from grace from a number of conservative content creators who, you know, they it's almost like they were wearing like a conservative costume.
Yep.
Like they were saying, hey, I believe in freedom. I believe in this. I'm against fascism. I'm against like these horrible things.
But not really.
And then October 7th happened, and you have someone like Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin wrote a book called Don't Burn This Book, i.e. like, you know, let me express myself. Dave Rubin was like, oh, are they banning Palestinian protesters in France? Maybe there is hope for the West. And it's like, you know, even if I don't necessarily agree with Palestine or whatever, it's like you're wanting to ban protests. You're the freedom guy wanting to like say, oh, it's good that we're banning this specific type of protest. And you've seen the same thing from a number of other conservative content creators. I even tweeted a joke at Gad Sad, who I really like. And he blocked me for it.
Yeah.
And
Really? He hasn't blocked me.
Yeah, it was because he was being like very sensitive. He was doing the whole thing. What's the exact thing? It's like, if you criticize, it was the whole thing of like, hey, actually, he was like, actually, if you criticize Zionism, like you are anti-Semitic. He was saying something like that. Yeah. And then I posted the meme of him with like blue hair, just as like a reminder of like, hey, you're kind of acting the same as you know, the people who you used to criticize, and then just like blocked me. And it's like, so was all of it a lie?
Yeah,
you know?
for real.
Or you just like, you know, when it comes to this topic of Israel, it's everything changes. Everything kind of goes out the window.
I was shit shocked.
Your team winning, apparently. So
yes.
It's very interesting. It's very fascinating. And like, I want to be clear for anyone who's watching, this has never been something I've ever been interested in. No. There's been people from the far right who are like, you got to look out for this chosen tribe. And I've been like, relax.
Yeah.
But since October 7th, it's like, man, I can't, there's patterns. I'm noticing patterns here. Wow.
It's certainly interesting. I was absolutely shit shocked because immediately, maybe a day later, immediately, because they were saying this is unprovoked. I was like, not unprovoked. These people are lying. And like, I don't know what the angle is, but they're lying. But right away I was
this is another example of accountability lab.
It is.
There's no way that they allowed this attack. That's crazy.
And then they're like, oh yeah, they definitely did.
One of the most secure borders. It's one of the most secure borders in the world, apparently. And then sure enough, what came out last week? What did it say?
The hand gliders were real.
We actually did know about this potential attack like months in advance, and we did nothing about it.
Yeah. But
what do you know?
I was shit shocked because I tracked this right away as something similar to like the Black Lives Matter or the railway things. And I was trying to tell people this. I was like, stop promoting this. Like, you're promoting a false flag. This is essentially a false flag. And people were like, you're blocked, buddy. I can't believe you're an anti-Zionist or whatever they're called. Anti-Semitic. And the other part of this is the Toronto by-election section, but the other part was how everybody was calling each other anti-Semitic and like, you know, finding the anti-Semitic person under the, you know what I mean? Like, all of a sudden, every problem that Canada had just disappeared. And they were like, I can't believe that you aren't on the same side as me about Israel, Palestine. And it's like, whoa, what? Like, I talk about Canadian politics. Why aren't we on Canada's side? Like, why are we funding any of this? It's crazy. So yeah, it doesn't make any GD sense whatsoever. But let's actually talk about the Toronto by-election and not get waylaid by Palestine and Israel.
I will say one last thing. I made a tweet a while ago, which was like, it really seems like a Canadian politics is a contest to see who can make the biggest deal about some foreign interest.
It is.
It's always like, oh, this for Palestine, or oh, this for Israel, or oh, this for Sikhs, or oh, this for like, you know, Ukraine. It's like, it's always like, so the priorities are anything but Canadians in Canada, right?
But
like anything else is the priority of these politicians.
That insulates them. What that does is makes them sure that one, they have something that's going to resonate with their voters, and two, they definitely don't have to talk about anything that is going to impact their voters. Right? The voters are like, yeah, free Palestine, yeah, Ukraine. But you're like, yeah,
why
definitely.
Is that a good thing? What? Why is that a good thing?
Well,
we have to make sure that we're not talking about anything that's actually going to affect them, Remember? Always pointing in other directions.
Because we
Point
can make
point
promises like crazy and be like, those Ukrainians. I mean, we thought we had a deal and then just fell apart, right? Okay, so Toronto, this by-election.
This is a big deal, actually.
It is a big deal. So in 2011, when the Liberals were down to a third party ranking, I think they had 7 seats or something like that in the House of Commons, or was that Kathleen Wynne? They were down to third party. They were decimated after 2011. This riding still had Liberals by, I think it's like 28%. Maybe it was just by 11%. But the Liberals still won during that election. The fact that they lost now is a bellwether bigger than anybody is realizing whatsoever because of that statistic. I'm going to talk about that on my show tomorrow, but unbelievable stuff. I was like, holy cow, somebody did the percentages, the winning party percentage that they won by in the votes.
Yep.
All the way back to like 1993. And it's like 28%, 32%, 28%, 29%, 35%, like super big wins, super big Liberal majorities in this riding. And they've not lost it since before 93, right? And bingo, bingo, bango. It's like, I'm pretty happy about that. I think that's good. I think that it's good because the Liberals didn't win this. Had they won it, they were going to use it to
that's a big swing. It's an up by 17%.
Yeah, it's a big swing
from the last election. I'm just looking at some of the stats here.
Yeah.
So I actually, believe it or not, I think this. Well, we'll see, because I think the real question on everyone's mind is, will Trudeau step down? Are they going to swap out Trudeau for somebody else?
Mark Carney?
I think that I'm of two minds. On one hand, I think that it would be bad for Trudeau to step down for the Liberals because they don't realize how effective his brand truly is. Like, although a lot of people are getting sick of him, it's like, dude, there's a lot of like normie voters who are like single moms who are still under the Trudeau spell. There's a lot of young kids who are under the Trudeau spell. It's like, you can't break the Trudeau spell. You can't get rid of him, because then all of his ideas of wokeness and all of his like bullshit also disintegrates with that. Because it's true, a lot of people don't like him right now, but it's like he's been casting this spell for 9 years now. And like, you're just going to get rid of that, for some guy who kind of looks and acts like a conservative.
Yeah. If
the that might not be good for them.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I was going to say, on the other hand, if Mark Carney can show up and be just as charming and handsome and like, check off the Trudeau box, and be just as woke, check off the next Trudeau box, and then talk about the economy for like 30 seconds, then in a way, Pierre Poilievre becomes completely irrelevant. And then Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives have to try to like double up on, Trudeau was a tyrant. They're tyrants and they're just like evil people, which they should have been doing since the convoy. I don't know why they didn't do that, because they're pussies basically, and they didn't want to go to war.
No, they didn't. No. They didn't want to do it because going after the Liberals, they did all the same things. Like, the Conservatives voted for a lot of the stuff the Liberals proposed.
Yeah, but I mean, so what?
If you voted for lockdowns, you can't now criticize the Liberals for lockdowns, right? Like, that's what I'm saying.
Well, if you wanted to win and change the moral paradigm, then you could, and then he could have done that.
Oh, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you necessarily. I think it would be a good attack angle, but
anyway, it didn't happen anyway. Like, that didn't happen. So, moving on.
The thing with Trudeau is, if they remove Trudeau, it legitimizes the complaint about his policies. Like, if they jettison Trudeau, then the next person can't come out and say, I'm a feminist, because like, that's burnt. That's done. You know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to hear it, least of all from Trudeau and from his successor, right? Nobody's going to vote for the feminist, yellow-toothed Mark Carney. It's just not going to happen. Or the witchy-looking Chrystia Freeland. If she put a pointed hat on, she would look like a witch. I mean, she does look like a witch.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I guess Trudeau might remain.
Yeah,
because it's too risky to try and do that transition from Trudeau to Carney.
They've got 16 months. But if
I always think too, when the media makes a big deal of something happening, it's usually not going to happen. They're like, "Oh, Trudeau's going to step down." It's like, you guys are kind of making too big a deal about this. I don't think it's going to happen.
That's exactly what I thought too. When you framed it like, "Oh yeah, Trudeau's got to step down now because he lost this," my initial response or my initial reaction is, I don't think so, because like, they've got too much. They're pot committed to Trudeau. Like, Trudeau is the woke brand. in Canada.
Yeah.
He is
He is the Liberal Party.
personification,
Yeah,
and he
you're
is
right.
the Liberal Party. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
if he goes, who's showing up to vote for that?
And it's true, like,
Leaderless?
their differentiator is like, hey, you're gonna get free abortions all the time. Like, hey, we're
Yes.
gonna like fight for black people all the time. Hey, we're gonna defeat the evil racists. So Trudeau stepping down, it's gonna make, I guess they're not committed to BLM.
Yeah.
I guess not.
No, well, they are. That's what led to their demise. Thank goodness. But yeah, no, if they get rid of Trudeau, I think they're going to have a rough, an even more difficult time. Although if they keep him, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't, which is great. I'm happy about that. Like, I'm not upset, but it's the solution to the Liberals' problem. Well, if you're an insider and you're like, I want to retain power, you don't have a solution. But in my opinion, the solution to what the Liberals have done is probably long jail sentences for people who are in the know, and like medium jail sentences for people who just went along with it and kept their mouths shut. Because like, look at the damage they've done. Holy smokeronies.
Like jail sentences for who?
Traitors and anybody who damaged the economy using COVID as an excuse. Anybody who was in office, like from public health to
So like this would be the
mayors.
answer if what, magically you were in charge, you're saying?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no, I think if anybody with sense was in charge, like if you walked into like what's his face did with El Salvador, Argentina. Like if you walk in and you say, how many of you people who work here are stealing? And they all kind of put their hands up and you're like, well, you're all fired. That's like the first step, right? Like that's what I'm talking about. Like if we were, if a leader who had genuine care for our country walked in and looked around and said, how many of you guys are working for China? And everybody was like, he should be like, you're fired. Okay, that's step one. And step two is like put you in jail because that's treason. And then step three is remove taxes from all energy and food. And then you wait. And then you deport people who don't belong here.
Yeah. I mean, that all sounds great.
I know, right?
The way I'm looking at it now, though, I feel like the fault is just straight up on the people. It's like, because none of that can happen unless there's a political will to make that happen. And the sort of depressing thing when I look around Canada is I see a lot of, pardon my language, probably not the people listening to this podcast, but a lot of people out there who are just kind of like hosers, and they're just like, oh, geez. Oh, that's too bad. Oh, what are you going to do about it?
We talk
like, well, if you're never going to give a fuck, then,
But okay, but like, I hear what you're saying. And I don't like to blame the victim. And I feel like Canadians have been victimized to a degree where it's like you've broken a dog. You know what I mean? Like you had a happy dog and the dog was like, I like being a dog and let's go play Frisbee. And then you've broken this dog and you're like, well, why aren't you standing up for yourself, dog? Like be a better dog. And the dog's just like, I'm real sorry, but like every time I try and stand up for myself, you hit me with the Frisbee. So I'm like, I'm just going to hang out here and not stand up for myself. So like, I understand, because the only people who are going to save us is ourselves. I know that.
That's my point.
I know that. But
that's my point.
But we're so broken and we're so not incapable, but there's a weight on the government side. So like if we had the Freedom Convoy and that was a meaningful protest in Canada, all of a sudden all sorts of people are being put in prison. Like they're trying to January 6th it as much as they can, like throw people in prison while letting other criminals who are participating in violent crime out. They do all of this stuff to undermine our ability to stand up for our sovereignty, stand up for our self-governance. They do that on purpose. And again, we're being victimized. We're being abused by our government. We're being treated in a way that should not happen in a proper system of governance, right? Regardless of democracy or not, because it should be a republic, but whatever. There should be some checks and balances for all of that, but there aren't. right? And so the public say, yeah, I agree with you, Greg, but if I say that publicly, I'm probably going to lose my job. I don't want to get injected with that thing, but if I don't, I'm going to lose my job. And then like my whole family depends on my salary. My kids are depending on this, blah, blah, blah. Like there are competing things. My mother's already had boosters and she's fine. And like my parents are pressuring me, my kids are pressuring me, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that you shouldn't stand tall in the face of adversity and stand up for what you believe in, but who could know what to believe in that period, during that period of time? Like for me, it seemed obvious, but not everything's obvious to everybody, right? You know what I mean? And like,
yeah.
When the government's saying it's safe and effective, blah, 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 what do you think? I think these people deserve prison time. I think these people should be arrested. I don't think that we should be like, ho hum, happy Canada. They're not even going to do Canada Day. Like we're in a post-national state now. They're trying to erase Canada, and and we are the broken dog in the crate, just hoping they don't beat us with the Frisbee again. Unfortunately.
Yeah. So I guess my whole point is, it really is a dark time. It's a really rough situation. It really is the sort of like, it's not looking good. It's not looking good for this old beaten dog, and there's not much utility in, I guess I worry that a lot of people who are paying attention to what's happening are becoming possessed by their fear, anger, and resentment. I believe in righteous anger, and I think righteous anger is totally justified, but I think too often I'm seeing the righteous anger not kind of directed in a positive direction. Like I think the righteous anger needs to be like very kind of intentional and sort of toward a good end. And I brought up the whole like we have no one to blame but ourselves thing, because when I look around and talk to people, I just feel like you don't care about the country, you care about your bank account. Or you're just completely apolitical and you're completely out to lunch and you don't care at all. You especially don't care about your country, and you especially only care about your bank account and your vacation. And I guess my point is like we act like this we need a miracle. We need to do the impossible. And I don't know what you're going to think about this or what the audience is going to think about this. You can only do the impossible through God.
Yeah, well, okay. So
like I think it might sound woo woo, but it's like the solution is literally a spiritual one. It's literally like a dig deep. I don't know what that necessarily means.
See, that's the problem.
One person to the next.
Yeah, that's the problem. But
saying like, hey, we should arrest these people and this and that. It's like, well, we have no political power to do that. So
I want to back it up a little bit, because you were talking about how like most people are so checked out, they just care about their bank accounts, the blah 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 blah, and they're just focused on their day-to-day problems. They can't see the bigger problems. Okay, so sure. and then almost directly from there, you said like this is a spiritual problem, and I agree with you. I really, honestly, genuinely agree with you. I think that the spiritual problem is that we as a society forgot the right way to live. Okay. And we started living in a way that is harmful to us, a way that prioritizes bank accounts, a way that prioritizes work over family, both like being at work and being away from your family, but also being at work instead of starting your family, right? Like you better be, and also high expectations. You better have, $40,000 a year and own your own house before you have a baby. You better be responsible. We medicate away a woman's natural state. You've gone through puberty, sure. Lady. Here's some medication to prevent you from being able to get pregnant. But look at those OnlyFans subscriptions you'll be able to have, right? Like, okay. I often think that our society is structured in a way to get us living in a way that keeps us out of touch with God. Does that make sense? Because like a woman a woman who's raising her children and who wants to protect her children is going to do that in the best way that she knows how. And if she doesn't have competing interests, like, my boss expects me to be at work at, 5:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning or whatever, then she's going to put everything she has into her family. And maybe that creates the capacity where she needs awareness or she has the awareness to stand up to this tyranny, et cetera, et cetera. But she'd be plugged into her family in such a way that it would be difficult to hurt them, right? And the same with the male in that relationship. Men and women are competing for jobs, and women have the edge because they have more education, and really they do. They have the edge in our society at this point in time.
No, I'm just smiling because I feel like this is going toward a feminism and its consequences.
Oh, dude, I think feminism is, and I've talked about this as well, but feminism has been a disaster for the modern woman. Like, look at the rates of anxiety just only increased with the reduction of like childbearing during childbearing years and all sorts of stuff. Anxiety goes through the roof. Women are much worse off now than they were before feminism. But New Age feminism is built to destroy the family, and the family is a structure that is ancient, right? And they're trying to use, and it works really well, and they're trying to use the family against us. And
of course.
Money, have you ever heard money is the root of all evil?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like if money is more important than your family, then like that's evil.
That's a problem.
You know what I'm saying? Like, but I understand you can say, I need money to serve my family. I need money to feed my family. I need money to do this for my family. We need vacations and all this other stuff. Okay. Yeah. Like that's what I'm talking about. The societal break. We've screwed it up to such a degree. Land. We have so much land in Canada. You could have your own land. England's a postage stamp compared to Canada. And like people have more property in England than they have in Canada. We could have land. Your birthright could be an acre of land, and that would be able to feed you for your entire life.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
I totally agree with what you're saying, and I'm curious to your audience, Mark's audience. Was Mark this like aggressively against feminism 6 months ago? I don't remember if you've been been radicalizing yourself over the past 6 months, but I tend to agree. And the thing is, when it comes to like being someone who's further right than the Conservative Party, this is the type of stuff that needs to become more popular. And this is the type of stuff that any one part of the CPC will piss themselves because they're like, I wouldn't say that. I'm going to get called a sexist. Yep. And for people who this is making uncomfortable, it's like, oh, Greg, you are sounding sexist. This is sounding sexist. I know lots of strong women, blah, blah, blah. The thing is,
missing the point.
Yeah, you're missing the point. The point is, to get what you want in politics, you need to exaggerate what your point is. Like, for example, let's look at our political enemies. They say stuff like trans women are women. That's fucking nuts. That's crazy, fucking insane. But they say that to completely exaggerate their point to push their insane politics. Same thing with the World Economic Forum. You will own nothing. Like they're going to that extreme point of what their belief system is or what they want for the world. We need to do the same thing. And this is going to be offensive to some people, but we need the same thing of like, women belong in the kitchen, actually. That's actually best for the family, believe it or not. You can disagree. There's exceptions, blah, blah, blah. But that kind of old school Christian morality, whether you like it or not, that really is an answer to our enemy, because our enemies have their own morality, which is inverting all that stuff. If you go back to what the answer is and what the truth is, it truly is at its core a Christian morality, believing in your family, believing in something greater than yourselves, like a nation, like God, and all of those things about taking care of thy fellow neighbor, blah, blah, blah. These at its core, these are all the things. You don't have to call it Christian necessarily if that makes you uncomfortable, but all the things that you liked about Canada before is basically a carbon copy, or is echoing. If
that's what it is, though, if you're like, listen, it's green, but if you want to call it orange, we can call it orange, but it's green. If you don't like talking about God, you don't have to talk about God, but it's God. Like, you know what I'm saying? I agree.
See, I'm saying
I just think it's funny. It just strikes me as funny.
I know how like Christ phobic
people
many white Canadians are for some reason. I don't know why, but like they're so like, oh no, they're pedophiles, and it's like you're still like brainwashed into that. Like, snap out of it.
Well, there are. I mean, I have a friend who's very upset about that too, and like I can understand.
I don't understand it. I don't get it.
Well, I can understand. I can understand, but like I think that the church itself has been perverted. Well, I have a whole other channel that talks about God, and I didn't even bring up religious institutions at all, though.
No, I know. The actual morality that we should be fighting for, because I tend to agree with you.
Yes,
religious institutions can be
rotten, and that's how I understand people's hesitation around religion, because I think that you can feel it, like there is a palpable something, a feeling within you that there is more to your consciousness, then is held in the body, right? But to me, it's interesting how people don't want to engage with that, don't want to talk about that, etc. But there is a way to live properly, right? Where you're going to not necessarily be successful. Like, you can't have if you want to learn French and you think to yourself, I want to learn French, and then you never do anything about it, you're not going to learn French. So like, there's an element of you participating as well, right? Like, you can't just be like, well, I'm living the way I'm living as prescribed by God in the correct way, right? And I'm still having a bad time, and that's God's fault because I'm living in the way he's prescribed, and it's not working out. And what I'm saying is, you have a part to play, right? Like, you have to actually fall in line with all of that. But fundamentally, when it's all working, then it works better than twisting reality and trying to make that work. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm not being clear.
No,
and I want to make just one more point before, because I have to go. I just realized what time it was. But if you had time and you could, like, make muffins for your kids, or cook from scratch, that thing that you cook from scratch, like an apple cobbler or a pie or something like that. If you had time and you could, isn't that better than picking it up at the store? Why or why not? Right? And like, it is better. Because there's another element that goes into it, and the time it takes can be shared with family, can be shared to, like, teach the younger generation how to do it, because fundamentally family is actually knowledge exchange. Passing down knowledge is one of the functions of family, right? And so like, doing that rather than getting it from the store is, there's a utility in that, and that utility is tightening family bonds, transferring information on how to do it, and like, spending the time together with purpose is different than sitting around watching a television show, right? Like, it's different, and it hits different, and people don't think about it because we're not trained to think about it. We are trained to just go to work and work hard, and like, that's how you serve your family. And that's what I mean. They've twisted things just slightly, and we think that we're doing the right thing, and really we're leaning into the wrong thing, right? And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, somebody told me that an atheist is just somebody who resents authority figures or their parents, and I think that's something definitely to meditate on. Yeah. But to me, it's like a North Star. Nobody reaches the North Star. You don't go to the North Star, but you use the North Star as a guide of, like, this is the ideal that we're steering towards. You're going to get off track. You're going to mess up. People make mistakes, but to kind of keep track of that North Star and where it is, and like, try to like move in that direction. Like, to me, that's a healthy relationship with a moral system, a religion, whatever you want to call it. Like, because I feel like a lot of people have this idea of like, oh, I'm going to be shamed and damned to hell if I make one little mistake. And it's like, that's not the, I feel like a lot of people have a bad relationship with Christianity because of that. They feel shamed, they feel afraid, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, it's like, it's not, God loves you. And
it's work too. It's work. It's like, not fear of the work, but there is work involved. Like, you can't say, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to lose weight, and then not do anything. I'm going to learn French and not do anything. Like, if you say I'm a Christian, but I don't do anything about that, like, right? Yeah, like, there's a difference there. You have to do something.
Just to bring up the resentment thing one more time, like, it's unhealthy to hold on to resentments. Okay. And this is a fact, whether you like it or not, it is a fact that if you look at the positive aspects of Canadian society from history, from our past, that are the healthy ones that like you got to grow up with and gratefully have, Christian values is going to be the common denominator there. You can't deny that. And you might say, no, but it's because we were just good people. And that's because, again, that's your resentment talking. You're holding on to that resentment or something. You're kind of like making these excuses not to kind of just accept the reality that was the common denominator. That doesn't mean it was a bunch of like perfect French Catholics and perfect, like, English Protestants. But again, it's the North
It
Star.
was the ideal.
that
It was
Canadian
the
society
guiding
was trying
ideal.
Yeah, it's the guiding ideal, exactly.
Yeah, man.
And I think we need to get back to that, and then ideally have conservative politicians say these things out loud that will be fundamentally controversial in this political correct climate, but will also just be like a true thing that's like, yeah, that's totally reasonable. He's talking about his family. He's talking about his nation. He's talking about, like, basic, values that a lot of people share.
Yep.
And that's the formula, I think, to success. But I think this Conservative Party is completely cooked. So I don't think they're going to help us.
Yeah, the Uniparty, but that's a different show. But anyway,
and sorry, the one, just to kind of give context to why I even brought this up, I feel like a lot of people are getting caught up in the rage bait cycle online. So I'm saying, not to like be a dick, but it's like, it's our own fault, i.e., like, it's cliche, but it's like the best thing you can do is work on yourself, like by far.
Yep.
Like, don't get caught up in all this nonsense, blah, 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 that's going on. Stay up to date if you'd like, but I feel like so many people are getting kind of overwhelmed with all the bullshit going on. And it's like that has diminishing returns. Focusing on that.
Yep. Focus on making sick memes. And
unless you're Mark and me and you do
right.
it for a living and you swim through it.
That's right,
every
buddy.
day.
That's right. All right. And with that, I've got to bring it to an end. I hope we're able to get together again soon, Greg. This has been super fun. So thanks for showing up, and everybody watching.
Good chatting with you again, Mark. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been awesome, dude. It's really, really fun. And I think the conversations go into weird places. And I mean, like we didn't even talk about what we were going to talk about before we got started. We just started rolling with the camera, and it's so much fun. So thanks a lot. And thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.